We will start with item number 2, the pledges of allegiance to the flag. Following the pledge, we will have a brief moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, on to item number 3, public comment. I don't believe we had anybody sign up for public comment, so we will move on to item number 4, approval of the October 1st and 22nd, 2024 committee minutes. Supervisor Drabek with the motion. Supervisor DeBrew with the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item number 5, operational functions required by state statute, ordinance, or resolution. 5A, public hearings, review of possible actions and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration, county zoning changes. I will now open the public hearing. If I could ask everybody to please mute your phone. The Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is now meeting in a public hearing on the location, plans, and specifications for the purpose of the following projects. Item 5A1, Zach Rao on behalf of Peggy's LLC, General Agriculture to Rural Residential Town of Holton. I would now like to introduce the members of the committee. To my left, I have Supervisor Seefeld, following is Supervisor Drabek, and down Supervisor Kroll, Supervisor Schoenborn, Supervisor DeBrew, and we have Tom Miller, who is our farm representative. We also have staff, Lori Miskimmons, the CPZ Director, Kirsty Heidenreich, the County Conservationist, Garrett Poggle, the Land Use Specialist, and Nicole Deloney, the Interim Office Manager. The establishment of the ERC committee is required by law for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. This committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. The committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws, but must apply the laws as written. The purpose of this committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation and planning programs. The ERC committee will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. A tape recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist in the preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be opened by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant and anyone wishing to testify will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in the order of those: first in favor, second opposed, and third as interested. The committee may ask questions of the zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orderly discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name, present your testimony or question so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all the necessary facts, the chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony. The committee will deliberate and decide in front of the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during the deliberation. However, the committee may question staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. Many of the decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Contact staff for more information regarding the county board process. The committee will now hear the application of item 5A1, Zach Rao on behalf of Peggy's LLC General Agriculture to Rural Residential in the town of Holton. Garrett, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
All right, this is for Peggy's LLC, petition to rezone land, staff report November 5th, 2024, for the Environmental Resources Committee. Petitioner is Zach Rao, located at N2239 Black River Road, Medford, Wisconsin, 54451. Property owner is Peggy's LLC at 229 County Road F, Abbotsford, Wisconsin, 54405. Area proposed to be rezoned is located just north of the intersection of State Highway 29 and County Road F. The petition of Zach Rao on behalf of Peggy's LLC to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential located in part of the southwest quarter and part of the northwest quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 36, Township 29 North, Range 2 East, Town of Holton. Area proposed to be rezoned from GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential is described as Lot 1 of the preliminary CSM, parent parcel numbers as listed. The Town of Holton Town Board met on September 11th, 2024. Marathon County Environmental Resource Committee is meeting today, November 5th, 2024 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. On September 11th, 2024, the Town of Holton Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. Staff recommendation, the rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
All right, does anybody have any questions for staff? Okay, no questions for staff. Is there anybody that would like to speak in favor of this application? Once again, is anybody willing to speak in favor of this application? Is there anybody who would like to speak against this application? One more time. Will anybody like to speak against this application? Does anybody want to speak as interested? Okay, hearing none, I will now declare this public hearing closed. The committee will now deliberate. What are our wishes? Supervisor Seefeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Vice Chair. I'll make a motion for the petition of Zach Rao on behalf of Peggy's LLC to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone land from GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential in the town of Holton and to prove the conclusions of law and forward it to the county board.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Tom Miller with the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to item 5B, review and possible recommendations to county board for its consideration. Town zoning changes pursuant to 60.62 sub 3 Wisconsin stats, none. So we'll go to item 5C, review and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. 5C1, continued opportunity for discussion regarding the 2025 annual budget. Does anybody have any questions or comments on our annual budget as it pertains to Environmental Resources Committee? No questions or comments? Okay. We will move on to item 6, educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, and committee discussion, department updates, conservation planning and zoning, parks, recreation, and forestry, conservation planning and zoning, 6A1, a brief update on groundwater plan efforts.
Supervisor Ritter, I can give that brief update. We just wanted to provide the Environmental Resources Committee sort of a status of where we are with the groundwater plan update, since I don't think we've given you one in a few months here. But we did actually achieve our 1,000 well samples earlier this year. And right now we are working with the UW Stevens Point to complete the analysis of those results. We recently met with our groundwater work group, which actually does include Supervisor Ritter and Supervisor Robinson, as well as many regional and local people who provide us guidance and advice as we're working through the groundwater plan. So we did do some initial results presentation to that group. And also sought some guidance from them in continuing to develop the plan that we're working to put together for the county board. At this time, we are planning to bring the UW Stevens Point Water and Environmental Analysis Lab to the ERC in January for an in-depth presentation on the analysis from the water samples that we collected through this groundwater plan update. So that's all we wanted to share with you at this point, was just that work is very much still underway. We are getting things pulled together and analysis done, and we are looking forward to giving you a presentation on that in January.
Very good. I will also comment that, yes, they have been working very hard. They've got a really good sampling on that, and I was kind of impressed at how scattered and spread out it was through the county. So it wasn't just clustered in certain areas. So I think we're going to get some good data out of that. Okay, moving on to item 7, policy issues, discussion, and potential committee determination. 7A, Big O Plain, next steps. Kirsty.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, ERC. I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to join us today on this rainy day, our important election day. I'm sure there's many other things you could be doing, and it is a light agenda today. So thank you for seeing what was on the agenda and still making the commitment to be here and spend some time with us. So I want to kind of loop back to a discussion that we've been having as a committee for the past couple of months. We're going to talk about it last month, and we just kind of ran out of time, so we knew this was going to be a lighter agenda this month, and we just wanted to kind of give it the time it deserves, as we know that this is certainly not a light topic in which we can make quick decisions. So I just wanted to start out our continued discussion of the Big O Plain with a little bit of good news, because who doesn't like starting with some good news? So the good news is coming from EPIC, our producer-led group in Western Marathon County, the O Plain Partnership for Integrated Conservation. So we've been talking a little bit about this group and introducing our new committee members to this wonderful group that we have, that is a group of farmers and other landowners in Marathon County that are really leaders in the state in conservation and also in farmer-led movements of watershed protection. And so EPIC has been around for quite a few years now. They are almost a decade old already, one of the oldest producer-led groups in Wisconsin. And every year, the EPIC Advisory Panel meets, in which myself and other members of our department are on the advisory panel. Tom Miller's on the advisory panel. And we decide what area of conservation would be most beneficial to focus on this year. So all producer-led groups in Wisconsin have a pot of money that they are given each year for conservation practices, incentives, and to basically help, give a voice and action to the movement that they are trying to see happen in the watershed that they're protecting. And so EPIC recently decided that for 2025, they wanted to submit their grant application to the state of Wisconsin Department of Agriculture incentivizing responsible manure management practices. So typically what we've seen EPIC do in years past is focus a little bit more on what I'm going to call traditional conservation practices. So things like cover crops, which are crops that are ensuring that there's always a growing cover on our soil. Things like reduced tillage or no tillage to prevent soil erosion. A lot of those standard conservation practices, along with incentivizing getting perennial grasses on the ground. But EPIC had heard that this committee was having recent discussions on what we can do to minimize phosphorus runoff in the Big O Plain watershed, and what we can do to dig into the big runoff we're seeing with winter spreading of manure. So EPIC decided to support what they're already hearing happening in the county and try to help us build momentum, which I think is just astounding that they are doing this. And so EPIC's cost sharing program in 2025 will be available to all farmers in the Big O Plain watershed. This is most of Western Marathon County. And farmers may receive $50 an acre for various manure management practices, including no winter spreading, if they will be doing this for the first time. So all of these practices become incentivized if they're willing to kind of take that slight risk of saying, for the first time ever, I'm going to do this related to responsible manure management. And those are all practices that are approved by agency staff, by our staff or NRCS staff that work on the advisory panel to make sure that those are done appropriately. So I just wanted to let you know how exciting that was to us, because as far as we know, and with the research that we've done in Wisconsin, it is still considered very progressive to, be moving in this direction of incentivizing, no winter spreading and really focusing on targeting the specific area of phosphorus runoff that we're dealing with. And then another bit of information I wanted to update you on that I felt you would find useful is that our conservation staff has been collecting total phosphorus samples in 3 spots in the Fenwood Creek watershed. So just to remind you, this is our #1 priority watershed in Western Marathon County, in which Marathon County has written in their strategic plan. We're trying to decrease phosphorus in this watershed by 20%. And they're also sampling 1 spot near the headwaters of the Big O Plain River. So that's getting, up towards the Taylor County, Clark County line way in Western Marathon County. So what we've learned is that results have shown that total phosphorus levels are consistently about 3 to 4 times the state standard of 0.075 milligrams per liter in streams and rivers, with 2 of our samples last year being 55 times higher than the state standard for phosphorus. 55 times higher than the state standard for phosphorus. So these are the locations where those samples are being collected. So that one I mentioned that's up in the headwaters, that's up in the town of Holton. And then the other 3 sample locations are in the Fenwood Creek watershed. And those 3 samples in the Fenwood Creek watershed, we applied for and received a grant through the Wisconsin DNR to get all those costs covered. And it's pretty costly. So each sample is about $50, and we take 1 sample every other week from those 4 locations. So, if you do that over a year, that obviously adds up very, very quickly. So we were really excited that we applied for that grant and received it, so that cost doesn't come back to us. The data is very valuable. So this brings us back to the point of, what we've been discussing the past couple of months here. So I don't want to repeat a bunch of information. So I did include a lot of those same slides that we went through over the past couple months. I just kept them in the slide deck in case you want to pop back to them and refresh your memory with some of that information. But what it all boils down to is we really are looking for suggestions on developing draft policies. And there are many reasons why we want to have this discussion with you, but more than anything, we showed examples in the past meeting or two where we have so many strategic plans and lake management plans and, county land and water plans saying these are the things that we want to do, that the full county board has adopted in years past, and yet no action has happened from those plans. And so we're taking the time to put together these wonderful plans, but then we're not following up and taking action. And so that's what we would like to do. So our September meeting did focus around the parameters of winter spreading of liquid manure. And I'm sure some of you recall those discussions. These are some new pictures that I recently came across when we're working on scanning in many of our hard copies of items we're finding around the office, because our office is moving from River Drive to the Lakeview campus here in the next couple months. So we're trying to get ready to go. So I found lots of treasures of days past. And so here's a couple of pictures from the late 90s. So this is the Big O Plain River going into the Big O Plain Reservoir. And this is just an example of what we typically see happen during these winter runoff periods and spring melt time. So we know that, February, March, April, when the soil is still frozen, but things are starting to heat up a lot during the day, we know that we see a lot of the manure running off of the fields that is applied to our fields on frozen soil. And that's where we're seeing the majority of the phosphorus loading happening in our surface waters in Marathon County. So, you really can't do a much better job describing what's happening than taking a look at these pictures. And I'm really glad that someone was able to get up into a plane and take these pictures, because they are really helpful imagery, certainly. And we talked about, in past meetings that we've worked with a lot of really qualified professionals from universities across Wisconsin through state agencies like the Wisconsin DNR to come up with enough data to show that by stopping winter spreading in Marathon County, we would see about a 250 to 360% reduction in phosphorus hitting our surface water. So just a colossal reduction at pretty minimal cost as well. So that's why we're having these discussions to talk about what that could possibly look like. One thing we discussed in past meetings as well is we thought it would just be a good use of time to take a look at what other counties in Wisconsin are doing in this realm. Because first of all, we don't want to reinvent the wheel if someone has already, found a way to tackle these situations. And secondly, we want to see how would we compare to some of our neighbors or counties of comparable sizes. We know in Marathon County that agriculture, it's our biggest industry. And so we know our culture here will always be focusing on, what can we do to support our ag industry. But we also know that we have to find that symbiosis of our ag industry, living together in harmony with the environment as well. And we're very confident that that is possible here. And so I did reach out to all the other county conservationists in Wisconsin and ask them what they are doing in this realm. And the Dane County Conservationist was very helpful. So this is probably the most thorough information that we received. So Dane County requires all farms that propose to spread manure, whether that is solid or liquid, in frozen or snow-covered conditions to obtain a winter spreading permit. So this is something that they do for all farms, whether you have 10 animal units or 10,000. It's not limited to size. And so this is something that they implemented since 2006. So they have been doing it for quite some time. And she mentioned that it has worked well for them. It was a little bit of a clunky start. But once that system is in place, it became a widespread understanding that this is what's expected. And it's working well for them. And so what their permit requires is that farms have to follow the NRCS 590 winter spreading standards. And right now, most of our farmers in Marathon County are already required to follow the 590 standards. That's the standard for nutrient management. So over 60% of our farms already have a nutrient management plan, and they're used to following those nutrient management plan standards. So in every nutrient management plan, there is a specific set of instructions and maps on where you can and cannot spread manure in the winter. So that's what that's doing. And the permit is good for 4 years. So it's not an annual process, to come in and update that. So every 4 years. And then what the staff does there is they conduct spot checks on 25% of the permits each year in February, because that's when we're starting the riskiest time of the year for runoff. And they have about, 200 plus permits that are issued. And they have everything available on their website if anyone wants to dig into it a little bit more. Similar to Marathon County, they have a very active and vibrant producer-led group as well. Their group is called Yahara Pride Farms. And similar to Epic, they also incentivize farmers through payments to winter headland stack manure rather than spread it during the winter. So what that means is they're stacking it in an approved place on soils that make sense, in a safe place on a slope that is flat, so that there is almost no risk of runoff. Okay, another example is Kewaunee County. So this is over by Door County on the eastern side of Wisconsin. And I'm sure almost all of us in the room are very familiar with the groundwater problems they have faced that have been, very much public knowledge over the past decade or so. They have karst topography over there. They have bedrock that allows for anything on the surface to very easily enter the water table. And so their county ordinance mandates that there is no manure application from January 1st to April 15th on less than 20 feet to bedrock. So that's interesting as well. We do have parts of Marathon County that have extremely shallow bedrock as well, like less than 5 feet to bedrock for a lot of the central part of western Marathon County, if you kind of follow the Highway 29 corridor and go north to south. And while we have not confirmed it with a hydrogeologist yet, hopefully we can dig into it with our Marathon County groundwater group. But it's kind of our hypothesis that there's likely a lot of fractures in that bedrock as well, because there are some contamination issues in that corridor of bedrock that leads us to believe that even though there's not like huge over applications happening, stuff is getting to the water table very easily. As well. So while we don't have identical bedrock to eastern Wisconsin, we certainly have some very sensitive geological areas that would perhaps be beneficial to explore a policy like this as well. And then Door County, they worked with the state of Wisconsin to develop a kind of a strict county ordinance that has specific standards for their bedrock. So what they do is manure cannot be mechanically applied. And we use mechanically because that way it doesn't affect grazing operations, because when manure is coming directly out of a cow, it's usually not causing quite as many problems as large equipment spreading commercial fertilizer or manure. So that's why you see the word mechanically applied when we're talking about nutrients a lot. So manure cannot be mechanically applied on areas of cropland or pastures that have 24 inches or less of separation between ground surface and the water table. So, they're aiming for about that 2 feet sensitive area. And then they also deal with headland stacking as well, and so they don't want manure on soils within 5 feet or less to Silurian bedrock. So lastly, the only other winter restriction county in Wisconsin is Manitowoc County, and they have spreading requirements based on seasons, manure, and slope. So they kind of take a calculated approach to what time of the year are we in, what slope are you working on? Are you on a steep field? Are you on a flat field? And then they have rules related to incorporation. So when you see that word incorporate, what that means is using equipment to mix it in with the soil. And when that happens, there is less of a chance of runoff as well. And sometimes they do offer exceptions for operators that do have conservation practices on the ground, like contour strips or crop residue that's left behind. So they have found this method to work with them as well. This does mimic a lot of our state standards, but our state standards don't necessarily break things into neat and clean dates like that as well. We did discuss as staff, what would it look like if we ever wanted to come up with some type of policy, no matter what it is, related to dates, and just kind of how we feel as conservationists is, with changing weather patterns that we've seen happening, it's hard to put some of these concepts into a box of dates as well. I mean, if you look at last winter, there were a lot of fields where the soil never even froze, and so there's always going to be exceptions to that. And so, putting ourselves into boxes of saying the weather will likely be this month of the year and likely this time of the year, that may not be the best approach to the situation, in our opinion. So those are the couple of counties that have created, these local ordinances, local policies. That took me, probably 5 minutes to get through with you guys. So as you can see, there is not a lot of counties in Wisconsin that are moving forward to make these changes. That being said, it doesn't matter because Marathon County is a leader and will always be a leader. And I'm so proud of all that Marathon County has accomplished and done locally that has become a state process over the years. And we've talked about some of that when we were talking about our Fenwood Creek watershed efforts. There are examples like the Marathon County mine reclamation ordinance that happened in the 1980s. We were the first county in the state of Wisconsin that said, when you're done with the mine, you can't just leave it. You got to fix it up. You got to fill it up or make it a lake or seed it down, do something so that it's not an eyesore, so that it's safe to the public, it's safe to wildlife. And at that time, that was revolutionary. And now look, it is a state standard, and the state adopted Marathon County's ordinance almost word for word. And so what an opportunity we have to work together to try to come up with some type of policy so that we can once again be a leader in the state, to show that we do value our surface water, we value our groundwater, and we want to be the healthiest, the safest, and the most prosperous county in Wisconsin. So just a couple of points that I'll reiterate with this. We aren't naive. We know that us creating some type of policy or procedure is not going to magically stop runoff events. It's not restrictions that stop runoff events. It's people that can stop runoff events. It's people that have to make these choices. So we know that more outreach is needed, because if we can work with people to understand the key factors that are producing the runoff, that's going to be our best way to reduce it day in and day out. And so it's wonderful when we do get to work with landowners who are maybe experiencing challenging situations. We certainly try to show as much grace as we can when we see these situations happening, and try to, have it be an educational process as well. But at the end of the day, it's going to take landowners from many backgrounds to work together to improve our surface water quality. So I also don't want the take-home message to be that it's farmers only that need to work together to improve our surface water. It is every single one of us. It's the lakefront landowners that are maybe putting on a lot of fertilizer, or they live by a stream or a river, not just a lake. It's folks that have a curb and gutter system that are allowing a lot of runoff to occur there that could have some type of nutrients in it. It's going to take all of us to work together to do that. And so it's not just one sector we are targeting, certainly. So that's kind of what I wanted to present to you with today in terms of the data that we've gathered from other counties in Wisconsin. I wanted to let you know what other people are doing, and I would also love to hear what you are thinking in terms of possible paths to move forward as well. In an ideal world, what we would walk away with from today's meeting would be some type of direction given to the Conservation Department in terms of, could you start developing verbiage for our animal waste ordinance that ties in XYZ concepts that we talked about today. What I don't want to do is I don't want to spend, 100 hours of staff time developing a new portion of the ordinance and then present it to you and have it thrown into the waste can like a basketball from the corner of the room. So, I want to, go forth knowing that there could be potential support and we could all work together to edit something, that we all feel really good about after we hear from the public how they are feeling as well. And we've already talked about, my desire to work with the Marathon County Farm Bureau, our county chapter of Wisconsin Farmers Union, have listening session as those monthly meetings, have public comment period. Right now we are in the thick of a manure complaint season, no pun intended. So we've had about, probably 20 manure complaints over the last 2 weeks that our staff are bopping around the county dealing with. And, there's not every single one of those is valid. There's a lot of urban folks in rural areas that there's still a lot of education that needs to occur in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. But it's wonderful that so often we're able to comment to them, hey, we are talking about this stuff right now with our county board members. We're having these discussions and we would absolutely love your input when we're making important decisions related to this. And so we'll keep you posted. Give us your email and we'll let you know when we're having public comment periods. And people they're excited to know that people care, that people are spending time talking about this and what can come of it. So.
Thank you, Kirsty. I would agree Marathon County has proven to be leaders in the state in a lot of different areas. I do think that we should, we can't tackle it all at once, but we do have to start somewhere. So at my last Wisconsin Land and Water Board of Directors meeting, during lunch, had a chance to have a conversation with some of the other people, and they were actually blown away at the time that this committee spends working with staff to get things accomplished. The one lady said they barely get 15 minutes of attention from their elected officials. So I think it's great we have this opportunity to work with staff. Just looking, does anybody have any comments or ideas for staff on how we can get started? Tom, go ahead.
I don't know if this is on, but
Just wait.
my recommendation, just reading these,
There you go.
is this working? Okay.
There you go.
I appreciate these different examples from different counties and looking at them. Dane County's probably got the one that'll actually move the needle on what we're trying to do here. It just fits to me, but I don't know if they have a fee for this permit or where that's at or any more detail than what you have here, but that would be my recommendation.
Supervisor Kroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions, Kirsty. The first one is going to be, I guess related to Tom's comment. What would a hypothetical permit cost be like? Is this per acre? Is this per farm? How does this look? Is it based on CAFO size, something like that? Maybe walk us through what an example might look like.
Yeah, that's a good question. I could try pulling up the Dane County website. I remember skimming through it and not being shocked about their fee permit, so it couldn't have been much. And you had mentioned just, CAFO size. So just as a reminder, this would be all for all non-CAFO farms because CAFO farms already cannot spread on frozen soils. If we're staying within the discussion of talking about what we're doing on frozen soils realm, the Dane County permit, it sounded like they do include CAFOs in it, but I don't know if there's a window of time that goes just a little bit before frozen soils, just a little bit after. I would have to dive into those details as well. We have not, as staff, talked about what it would look like for, a cost as well. We aren't in the business of having exorbitant costs at CPZ for our permits. I'm hearing from the peanut gallery in the back, it was a $500 permit. Was it? Without a nutrient management plan, but I'm guessing it becomes more affordable if you get a nutrient management plan, because we want that. 100, what a deal. $100 with a nutrient management plan. And wouldn't you know, in Marathon County, we have a way for you to get a free nutrient management plan in this county. So yeah, a nominal fee, then we would assume most people would pull the trigger and get a nutrient management plan. But I would envision having something like, a $100 permit fee as well. It goes down to 0. Wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
Great. I also had the question about how often is ESCPC staff taking measurements of the phosphorus levels in the Fenwood or the Big O Plain currently?
Yeah, on that map that I showed you, those are collected every other week. So twice a month from those 4 locations. So other than those 4 locations, we are not testing for total phosphorus anywhere. We do have another water quality testing program called Water Action Volunteers, in which we test 12 different streams across Marathon County and work with about 20 different volunteers. And that tests a variety of parameters, like what types of little critters are living in the stream, what the dissolved oxygen levels are, what the pH is, turbidity, velocity, all of those things. But since that total phosphorus test is so expensive, we just don't do it in many places. If we stepped back probably even 10 years ago, the Wisconsin DNR was testing for phosphorus in our streams, but that program really, it's just gone now compared to what it used to be. So it's only done if, there's someone local, like a county land conservation department, that's testing these smaller streams. Big bodies of water like the Wisconsin River, those are all tested probably daily by the state, but nothing little like what we're seeing here.
Great, thanks. I guess the reason I bring this question up is I'm curious if there could be some sort of alert that is broadcasted to farmers or agricultural specialists in that area once data is collected and it gets above a certain threshold. We went we went over the thresholds that you have seen, the 4, the 55, but maybe there's something that can just be noted like, hey, it's very high right now, maybe consider pulling off on phosphorus fertilization, stuff like that. So I would appreciate something like that to be looked at, is what an announcement might look like countywide once those levels are at a specific level. The other comment I had, the last one was how I know we're looking more at, manure runoff, but what is the impact of just agricultural phosphorus use, in general? Is there a certain percentage that you know of?
Like commercial fertilizer
Yep.
that's being spread, that's not manure?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, there's this handy little graph because that was calculated a couple years ago. It's right here. This is in the Marathon County Land and Water Plan. So the sources of phosphorus in Marathon County, so that red on this top graph, that is dairy manure is what that is. That orange slot right there is cash grain, and so that would typically be more the commercial fertilizer instead of manure. Sometimes they use manure too, but typically commercial. And then the pink is urban sources of phosphorus, so what we're seeing leaving our cities through our curb and gutter systems. This dark purple is our wastewater treatment facility. That is, our point sources that are discharging back in. And then this green slot, this is the background phosphorus in our waters that's just naturally occurring in our soils that varies around the state depending on geology and soil type and whatnot.
Well, thank you. That helps out a lot. I just had one final, comment or suggestion, and kind of, again, off of Tom's. So I believe a permit, like your process, I think that'd be really handy to look into. And also, I'm starting to think that application, the limitations might have to be explored if it's based on surface temperature or air temperature or time of year. I think that's something that needs to be explored, and I would look for some recommendations from you guys on that as well.
Yeah, that comment paired with your previous comment on, some type of warning system, you are thinking like a conservationist because, and that's so cool because I can't even remember if we've discussed this in previous meetings, but we applied for a grant through the Wisconsin DNR for those aerators like 2 years ago that we tied in a few other little neat efforts along with the funding for the aerators. And one thing that we dreamed up doing is creating a Big O Plain watershed runoff risk advisory alert system. And so while we're exploring options on how to do that, we feel like what it's likely going to be is creating a big text message alert system through an email sign up to people's cell phones. People would maybe get like 3 or 4 texts a year. This is not going to be some extreme election season, texts like we're all getting nonstop every day. And we wouldn't say things like, hello, friend, it's your conservationist, Kirsty Heidenreich. Oh, I've read hundreds of those texts lately. So, but we would have an alert system like that for our producers in the Big O Plain watershed, using the data that's already developed by the state and then more localized data saying, hey, the next 24 hours is showing severe risk of runoff, do not spread. And so we know that people would probably pay more attention to that localized information versus having to go onto a kind of clunky state website and check and see what the runoff advisory risk is as well. So I do think it would be challenging to maybe look at current data we're seeing and say, hey, we're way over the phosphorus limits, let's pull back, because honestly, that's almost all coming during runoff events. So what we're seeing in our phosphorus testing, which if you'd ever like a copy of our Excel data sheet showing all of the dates and times and everything that we've collected is that when it's dry or a drought, we haven't gotten rain for a while, our phosphorus levels are actually well below the state standard of 0.075 milligrams per liter. But it's when we get those rain events that, and it's not even necessarily that there's so much surface runoff when the soils aren't frozen. What makes Western Marathon County unique is that 60% of it was wetlands. And so many of those fields were tiled to kind of help drain out those wet soils. So when you have the rain events, it seeps through into the tiles and the tiles outlet into the ditches, and the ditches lead to the streams. And so our streams a lot of them will just be ankle high, when we're in a dry spell, and then you go out on a rainy day and those will be ripping and a small child would get carried away quite easily from those streams, which become 10 feet high during a rain event. So it's pretty much the flashiest watershed you could just about imagine. So it's a really interesting history we have in Marathon County. If you ever want to look into it, it was back in I think it was the 1940s that the federal government incentivized farmers who were farming in the driftless on the very steep hills to move up to Marathon County. And then the government paid to drain all of our wetlands and have everyone settle on nice flat fields where there wouldn't be as much soil erosion. And now we don't have as much soil erosion because we do have a lot of flat land here. However, we've drained wetlands, we've tiled the fields, and now, unfortunately, most of our waters in Marathon County on the western side, I had that map up here with all the red lines. All the red lines on this map are all of our streams and rivers that are impaired by phosphorus, declared by the Environmental Protection Agency as 303D impaired. So, we're left with unswimmable waters for us and our families to recreate in. And I feel like we really just need to get to a point where we realize that, there are trade-offs we are making by doing nothing at this point. We can't pretend there's not a trade-off happening when we keep going with the status quo. But what we're really seeing is, things like we have this gorgeous county park that people love recreating in, and we have a body of water in that county park that's unswimmable. And that's one of the many trade-offs we're seeing. So I think we just really need to have a candid assessment of these trade-offs that are happening by what decisions we are or are not making in this realm.
Okay, anybody else? Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Christie, I love the approach. The couple of questions I have, and one of them refers probably back to the EPIC program, and the potential setting up of that program of a $50 payment to agricultural users. Is there going to be any ongoing requirements for non-spreading if they're going to receive that payment for first-time non-spreading 2025? Let's say they get the program up and running, but is there going to be a requirement that they continue to not winter spread in 2026 and any future?
That is a great question. I may have to count on Tom to remind me, but I believe they were planning on having the landowner sign a 4-year contract with a payment up front. And that 4-year contract would, I think it equates out to a $50 per acre one-time payment, but that's spread out over 4 years. So for sure, that contract is essentially, a binding document for those couple of years. And then beyond that, I don't know if there's anything that would legally hold them to that. What's encouraging is that with our Fenwood Creek pilot project, in which we are making payments for farmers to bring their phosphorus levels down, what we're seeing is that, once you get someone to do these practices the first couple of years and they see how well it's working and it's doable, we're seeing them stick with those practices. And when we ask questions like, do you ever see yourself going back to not planting cover crops or not doing, no tillage? Everyone's like, heck no. And, I'm out on the field 50% less of the time and I'm spending 50% on gas. And, we're just really hoping to create that culture of this becomes the new norm after we, pay for that initial risk to be taken.
Well, that's great. I think that's a very novel approach. Like I said, you change people's habits and practices, and in long term, you adopt the new practices. So the other question, though, relates around the potential development of a policy. How many farms do we know? How many farms this would impact in Marathon County? And then follow up to that would be, what kind of staff time allocation are we looking at, as far as, because it's something that we're not doing currently. And so are we looking at additional staffing needs to implement the licensing and then also the inspection and the spot inspection as far as timing for, moving forward?
Those are great questions. And when we've been having open and honest conversations with conservation staff, that's a lot to say, that has been one of their biggest concerns as well, and rightfully so, right? I mean, we have 8 conservationists. We could use 18 in our department. And so, of course, there's going to be some worry in terms of, if we take this on, what would it look like for us? That being said, our staff is confident that we would be able to work in one of these options. It's hard for me to say that with confidence because I have no idea what you would propose. However, if it is some, either some of the options we've seen other counties doing or a combination of those things, we feel pretty confident that we could do that, knowing that any new type of process we're instilling is not going to be immediate. What's the keywords we've liked to use the past couple meetings? Incremental changes, right, is what we want to see happening with time. And so it obviously eases the burden of staff time and investment in, new permitting and all of that as well. But things can be pretty simple. We had conversations about our livestock licensing farms that that would maybe be the easiest lift right out of the gate to implement some of these things with, because they already have a permit through Marathon County. They're already working with us to be monitored quarterly and have annual inspections. So, these are pretty large farms that are already being closely regulated. And so maybe that's kind of the first step or an easy lift in getting this going as well. So, we do have a good idea about the number of farms that would be affected and the amount of farms that are doing winter spreading still. We're very hesitant to just say some of those numbers out loud in a public meeting because we just don't want people to start getting anxiety about what the future could come, because we believe that this could be something fairly easily done that could be worked on together with our conservation staff. I'm sure it was a very similar situation years ago when we talked about having people starting to do nutrient management plans. You know, some of you who were involved in that probably remember those days of when that was happening, and it seemed like perhaps a big lift to start taking soil samples every 4 years and getting it into a computer system and working with county staff to submit that plan every year and covering some costs. But again, that's doable. It just, you got to take that initial first step. So we have looked into a lot of that. I'm just not sure what I should be sharing at this point until we're ready to decide how we would like to move forward. But that data is readily available.
I think that the other thing that needs to be thought out, I think, is, from a strategic standpoint, where is our starting point? Which farms are we looking at? Because I don't think that we could. Well, again, this committee can just debate where its starting point is, but if you're right, if we're looking at the medium-sized farms, the farms that are under the CAFO requirements or less than CAFO requirements, but less than the 25 animal farm operation, it will give you different numbers and different requirements and implementation slowly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Supervisor Jerbeck?
Thank you. I was just wondering, as I see in Taylor County and stuff, some of their waters are impaired too a little bit. So how much more did we impair them? I mean, how is it coming in, is what I'm trying to ask here.
Oh, boy. I think it's probably safest for me to say I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah, I've truly never looked into Taylor County's waters compared to ours. So the headwaters of the Big O Plain, while there are bits and pieces of it in Clark and Taylor counties, where the headwaters are, we're not necessarily seeing huge phosphorus loading occurring until we're starting to get more into Marathon County, if that makes sense. The streams are also much smaller. The Big O Plain gets really big as it travels closer to the reservoir. So if you would love to know the answer to that, I could certainly look into it. But a lot of what we're talking about, most of the watershed area is in Marathon County, and we just need to own up to what we've got and what we're working with. And I am confident in saying that, the pollutant loading is not coming from Clark and Taylor counties in the Big O Plain watershed that we're focusing on. But I would have to dig to get you specific numbers. But it's a very insightful question.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah. Supervisor Lemmer visiting.
Okay, thanks for letting me visit and ask a question. Kirsty, I'm just curious what kind of burden this might be on a farmer. If we put this forward, which I support, I absolutely support it. Mm-hmm. But I just wonder why aren't they doing it now? They must have storage problems maybe. And is there a solution to that, or is there education or advice that you would offer so that this is more successful?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So one concept that has worked well for our department is coming up with kind of creative out-of-the-box solutions for farmers who don't have any type of storage for the winter, without, letting them have the burden of having to build new manure storage, which is just, it's so costly in today's day and age. And so, if we step back to 20 years ago, no, 1995 is 30 years ago already. Oh my gosh. If we step back 30 years ago, we had about 1,500 farms, dairy farms in Marathon County. Now we have about 500 dairy farms. And In the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s, the state of Wisconsin invested tens of millions of dollars into our watersheds. And essentially every farm, especially dairy farms, got manure storages and concrete barnyards. And it was just a huge influx of infrastructure into our farming system in Wisconsin. And so a lot of those manure storages that were built, early 2000s or so, they are designed, engineered, constructed, still working beautifully. And then we have many other storages that were built since that time as well, in which those farms have gone out of business. Stories are endless. And so we have infrastructure in Marathon County of lots and lots of empty or, manure storage is not being used, no longer in use. And so we feel like that alone is a solution that could be used frequently to help solve this equation. And so even over the past couple years, I've been with Marathon County when we have someone that's constantly winter spreading and we're seeing runoff happening. We tell them, hey, you've reached a pivotal point. We need to do something here. We need to work with you on writing a grant to get a manure pit put in, or we got to figure something else out. And in every one of those situations, we've been able to provide them with farmers within a mile or two of where they live that have manure pits that are not being used. And in every one of those situations, they were able to rent a pit from someone that wasn't using it. And the person that wasn't using the pit, they get a couple $1,000s in rental payments for the year that they weren't previously getting. So it's a win-win for them. It's a win for the farmer that needs that storage because they don't have to spend $500,000 or more to build manure storage. And it's a win for us because we don't have to apply for a 100-page grant to get them a manure pit and design it and do all of that as well. It's a huge lift. And so that's one piece of the puzzle that we're really confident that that solution is there for a lot of people. Another piece of the puzzle is that a lot of our facilities, after looking through the data that we have, a lot of them are winter spreading, more of our medium to large farms, where they do have enough storage to get them through the winter, more than 180 days of storage, but they are choosing to winter spread out of convenience because it is a big burden to have to, empty pits in the spring and in the fall within a couple week window when there's a million other things that has to be done as well. So that's really challenging for our farmers, but we do know by looking at the data that spreading on frozen soils is happening just by a management choice. So we feel through education and the combination of, new policy coming through the county that there's a big group of people that have the storage already that can just make sure that the manure stays in there while the soils are frozen as well. And then, in terms of other potential costs or burdens as well, we're really hopeful that if we do have these listening sessions with, the Farm Bureau and Farmers Union and have public comment periods, we're hoping to hear from folks that are living this day in and day out to hear, what burden it could potentially cause them. If they think it's a great idea and they've been waiting to see this happen for many years, we're really interested to hear input as well. But I do know an area where our department absolutely thrives is, working individually with farms to find creative solutions that work for them. And you all truly could not have a better staff here at Marathon County to do that. I am astounded every single day with the level of knowledge and expertise that our staff have. And so it will be a challenge to look at these individual situations and work with farmers. But if there is, a timeline in which we would be implementing these things as well, even if it is a couple hundred farms that would be affected, that really is no different than the amount of farms we're already working with annually as well. And most of the farms we're already working with on something else already, whether it's a nutrient management plan or other conservation programs and practices.
Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments, ideas? Supervisor DeBro.
So what's our next step then to move forward, to get something in action? I know you can't do it overnight, but to at least start moving in the right direction. I think we all agreed something's got to be done. And we've been talking apparently for a lot of years and not doing a lot. So what's the next step then to start moving something forward?
Yeah, love the enthusiasm. I am with you. So what we would love to hear is, how would you like us as staff to do some data crunching, you know, give you drafts of things? What would you like us to do next so that we could present you with something, you know, over the next couple of meetings to look at together? If you are liking the idea of having a winter spreading permit, we could certainly look at, you know, what would that look like in Marathon County, come up with a potential permit, set of rules, talk with Dane County about, you know, is there anything that they like or don't like, but just can't change because they don't have the culture to get it changed in Dane County right now. You know, get some of those ideas and, you know, have a draft for you in the next month or two, and then edit that draft, get the public comment, mold it all together into a product we all feel really good about. But, you know, there's that idea. And then we have also talked extensively about, you know, what would it look like to incrementally, you know, put some type of restriction on spreading on frozen soils as well. To be candid with you, I do feel if we just pursued having people get a winter spreading permit, we likely will still see too much phosphorus running off into our surface waters. It's just unavoidable. There very likely could be a decrease from it as well. Very likely there would be a decreased amount, but you know, we're really good at supporting a lot of individual behavior changes in our county and in our conservation program, but there really needs to be some type of systemic change or systemic policy coming from the county if we really do want to truly move the needle in our water quality in this county. And so my fear is that if we do just go down the road of having a winter spreading permit, you know, we may not see the results that we're hoping for from it as well. So I believe that there's likely a combination of things we could be doing if we really want to make progress, you know, getting towards some of our end goals.
Okay, anybody else?
Could you put together a proposal for us, maybe for a soon meeting coming up, of maybe some suggestions you would have to move in that direction? And it sounds to me like winter spreading certainly has got to come to a halt. I know it's easy for me to say, I'm not a farmer no more. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of places where storage is being not utilized. So maybe there's ways of educating them a little bit and working with them to move towards that direction.
Supervisor Strongborn.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, compared in Marathon County, I guess I'm looking for a little homework from you. The difference between like the mega farms and these smaller farms. I mean, we're not going to put the burden on all these, you know, the smaller farms. The point I'm trying to make is that, you know, for us to look at that, you know, and I mean, you got to, I don't know what the number is, you know, and what is the ratio? You know, I mean, you're not going to throw a permit to a farmer that has, you know, 25 or 50 cows or whatever. And when you're looking at a mega farm as, you know, throughout the county that, you know, in Abbotsford or you know, all there's numerous of them, you know. I just feel that, you know, we don't want to, why should that person pay for a smaller farmer? You know, we're always trying to pick on make it equal or raise it a little bit. But I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that we really need to, if we're going to lay this all out, and, you know, I don't want to put the mega farms, you know, they're sticking their neck out and they got 1,000 cattle or whatever. I'm just saying. But I mean, the smaller farmers, you know, here we go, but you're going to give them another permit. You know, I need to get another permit to do this, you know, and, you know, I mean, it's try to make it equally across the board. I'm just trying to put something, or for you to put something into place, you know, because the mega farms they're turning for a profit, you know, I mean, and the smaller, you know, 25, 30, 35 head of cattle, you know, it's a little smaller and it's harder for them.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern for looking out for the little guys. Absolutely. We do try to be very careful, you know, in how we're characterizing pollution concerns relative to the size of farms. I can confidently say that some of our best managers and operators in Marathon County are our biggest farms. I can confidently say that the worst pollution problems I've seen in Marathon County in the almost 3 years I've worked here have been on small farms. And so, it's my belief, and I know my coworkers' belief, that it's not necessarily based on the size of the farm, it's based on the management style. And we can see that in any of our careers, right? It doesn't matter what career field you're in. It's like there are good employees, there are bad employees as well. And so, in our past discussions, I know that, we felt like there would likely be more, public outcry or concern if we did include the small farms in some of the new policies. So I know we talked about, saying, well, what would it look like if we maybe set some new policy related to winter spreading, especially at like 300 animal units, which the Environmental Protection Agency calls those medium-sized CAFO farms. So, it wouldn't be just our opinion saying these farms should do this. It's, the EPA says this is truly a mid-size farm. So we certainly could look at, policy based on this size as well. So I do think it's important to include that in our discussion in terms of, if it is very high priority to this committee to base our decision on the size of the farm, we can certainly do that, especially if we're doing something a little bit more incrementally. But I also just want to, encourage a little bit of caution and necessarily, fitting the size of the farm into neat little boxes, because I see it all. And so I know, and I want to try to do what I can to get rid of some of those stereotypes as well. Because it's important when we're talking about it with the public.
So is there any general, I don't want to say a line, but I know a lot of the small farms, say 25 to 50, a lot of those spread solid manure versus liquid. I mean, is there any visual that you guys can see where there is a line where they really start turning towards the liquid manure side, where that would kind of give us a starting point on farm size?
Yeah. I mean, if we are focusing, so when we talked about this in September and we talked about the potential for, restricting the spreading of liquid manure on frozen soils in our 303D impaired watershed. So we were very specific on a suggestion. So that wouldn't be all of Marathon County. I can bring the map up again because it is helpful. Eastern Marathon County does not have any impaired watersheds other than this one little piece of the Springbrook watershed coming out of the Antigo area. So there's just this little northeast corner of Marathon County. But the rest of Marathon County is impaired, other than there would be a watershed up in kind of like this north central part of Western Marathon County that it wouldn't be applicable to as well. But when we were talking about restricting the spreading of manure on frozen soils, we were focusing on liquid manure as well, just because we thought that that's where the majority of the concern would lie. And that's also where we tend to see the majority of the runoff occurring as well. And so, we really haven't given it a lot of thought related to solids. And it's also going back to, the mechanical application. So, it wouldn't affect grazing farms that are typically a little bit smaller as well, because we're not seeing runoff when there's, those thick layers of sod and perennial grasses as well. So, yeah, so that's kind of a hard question to answer, but I don't think that there's necessarily like a magic number in there, especially if we're including solids as well.
Can I speak to that a little bit? You probably don't think of it, but liquid manure is a new technology. Any farm can adapt new technology. It doesn't matter what it is. It was new at one point. I would say probably in the 70s it started becoming popular. So there's responsibility has to be taken by anybody who takes on new technology. And size specific doesn't matter. If it's liquid manure, and I agree, maybe we don't include solid on that. But we have a lot of Amish around us that are switching to liquid manure because they see the value of it and the economics of it. But that is one area that we can maybe address as far as differentiating between those two.
I agree. Yeah, and I'm sure there's data out there, even by University of Wisconsin Discovery Farms. I believe they have done runoff studies of liquid versus solid manures, and what percentage of risk is there if you're spreading solids on frozen soils. Because if we do delineate the difference between liquid or solid manure, isn't this just such a fun conversation? We're like really digging into this together. So if we're talking about liquid manure or solid manure, we can look at the data and say, what does it say? Because, if we're saying, okay, this doesn't affect people that only have solid manure, okay, so then the beef farmers aren't affected, and maybe some of the small farms aren't affected. And so, maybe that would be a little bit more amenable to the public as well.
Start there anyway.
Yeah, start there. Absolutely.
Is there any way in whatever you write up, you could kind of word it or educate people that, whether it happens immediately or not, that there's something coming down the road so that they know they got to kind of prepare for it in a year or two, no matter what size they are? Because I think manure is manure. I realize liquid is different, but I mean, you take solid manure on the wrong lay of the land.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be just as much problem, maybe more than liquid manure.
Yeah, you bet.
And I would guess that the larger farmers are probably maybe more educated, maybe doing a better job than some of the small farmers. And not picking on small farmers by no means, but and if you'd start wording that so you could, knowing that, get them to start thinking, well, in a year or two, we're going to have to do something. And at least that would give them some warning and time to plan that or work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly we'll have to have extensive discussions, but, I would feel that no matter what we come up with, we would say like, effective 2026 or, something like that, so that conservation staff also has the time to do that education, that outreach, start working with people so that they can be ready in 2026, that sort of thing. Absolutely agree.
Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you. I was just wondering on the, along the creeks, there should be a buffer before that they're not farming. Is there enough buffer?
No,
Or they're
no.
not, so that could be changed a little bit maybe?
Yeah, if we had buffers along all of our streams and rivers in Marathon County, we would not need to be talking about any of this today. That is our number one need. And so we have been working vigorously to try to get those, we call them riparian buffers, buffers along streams or rivers, get those in Marathon County. And what's really nice is the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, they're a federal conservation agency. So every county has a branch. We have one here in Wausau. They work hand in hand with FSA, the Farm Service Agency. They have a wonderful program called CREP, and it is within the CRP program, which some of you may have heard of. CREP is the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, and that is a program that pays you really good money per acre to put a vegetative buffer in along your wetland, your stream, or your river. And oftentimes you're getting much more in a payment per acre to do that than you would get off of any crop, off of any rental payment. They're beautiful. They stop runoff. The benefits are absolutely endless. And so we have people that were losing money on what we call marginal acreage, the really wet, mucky acreage near wetlands or streams that tractors are getting stuck in, and huge ruts are, being made in, and corn is growing 6 inches high, and they're losing, $200 an acre on it. They're putting in these vegetative buffers and getting, close to $200 an acre. And we are beginning to see that kind of take off in Marathon County, because people are starting to put that in and they're talking to their neighbors. And we had so much of it put in Marathon County last year that the NRCS had to call in reserves from other counties of their staff to come into Marathon County and help process all the paperwork and payments for our farmers. So it's so wonderful because that money's coming from the federal government. We don't have to have any of it here in Marathon County or in the state of Wisconsin. The federal government has seen billions of dollars in influx for conservation under the current administration. So there's just so much money out there for these types of practices. So it's really nice because it's not super competitive for people to be in that program either, where people are signing up and then being told, oh, sorry, we don't have enough money for you. But anyone who wants one can get one. So if anyone is listening to this online and you've wanted a buffer along a stream, now is the time to get your buffer in, and you will save Marathon County. It's the way to go. We cannot recommend it enough. So I love that your mind is going there, and truly that is like the number one need in these areas to stop runoff is those buffers along a stream. Even a 15-foot buffer along these streams make an exponential difference in stopping runoff.
Okay, anything further?
Talking about the buffers some more, how does that, with winter spreading, would that stop that as well if it's enough there, or would that not? I'm just,
Yeah.
just wondering.
Yeah, it absolutely helps. I think that, there's a lot of really good data we have showing that the wider the width of the buffer, the more work it's doing, right? And so in this CREP program, you can have a buffer, the smallest you can do is 30 feet. The biggest width you can go out from a riparian area is 150 feet. And so, when people are doing those 150-foot buffers, without having the data in front of me, I would guess there's probably zero runoff, from those buffers. And so they really are this, the solution to pollution is dilution. And, these buffers like really help that as well. And so, the wider the buffer, the more help it is. But right now, many of our streams have absolutely no buffer, to the point that a lot of our streams on the stream banks, you can even see like tire tracks sometimes, because people are partially in the stream bank. And so we really want to see that start to change over time and see more people, working on these conservation programs. It only makes sense. You're getting that bit of incentive. You're being a good example to your neighbor. You're stopping the runoff. So, we want to see more of that happen as well.
Okay, any other discussion? So as far as giving staff some sort of direction today, I would agree using Dane County as a model to see how we can marry that into Marathon County. Maybe kind of try to dial down, I don't want to say target farmers, but is it everybody? Is it just maybe gather more data into some of that and maybe do a combination effort, as Kirsty had mentioned? Does that sound pretty fair overall, nutshell? I mean, does that give you a clear enough direction on?
So let me just tell you what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if it's right. So what I'm hearing is you would like us to develop a draft permit for winter spreading in Marathon County, following Dane County's model, but edit it to Marathon County and work with the CPC director regarding pricing, et cetera. Probably make it a little similar to how we do a lot of other permitting here to make sure it's on the same page. And then we could also start a rough draft of an edit to our current animal waste ordinance to include specific options to restrict winter spreading. And we could put a couple different options in there on like farm sizes and windows of time, and knowing that we would all be editing it together in committee meetings over a couple of months. But at least we could have a couple options in the ordinance, and we could just see what sits well and what we're hearing during public comment periods. Does that
sound good to the committee? Supervisor Kroll.
I also wanted to get a draft of some sort about what a public informational message would be about like your higher levels of phosphorus. I know it might not be worthwhile exploring that much, but maybe just something of what it might look like and how that it can be administered to the county.
Yeah.
Okay, I think you've got some direction.
Okay.
Good. Looking forward to the further conversations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all the participation too. Very helpful.
Thank you. All right, so we will move on to item number 8. Our next meeting is December 3rd, 2024, at 3 p.m. in the Assembly Room. And future agenda items, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. 8B, announcements, requests, correspondence, 2025 ERC dates.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, we did update the ERC dates. After the last meeting, we were told by Chair Gibbs that there actually was a decision made to move all January meetings a week. So that is reflected now in the schedule for 2025. So those dates are set for 2025. So.
Okay, and I just want to add one real quick, we have a relatively short meeting, so if you haven't yet, exercise your civic duty and get out and vote yet today. It's an important election we have in front of us. Any other announcements? All righty, item 9, Supervisor Seefeld, are you sure? Yes. Supervisor Seefeld with a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Supervisor Kroll. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
This meeting is no longer being recorded.